And so, um, well, I don't know what's going on. Oh, there he goes. So yeah, really, I mean, stumbled upon Nolan on TikTok, doing some commercial real estate on my own, and liked what you guys are doing. So excited to be a part of it.
Well, that's great, man. We're excited to have you too. Just I think you're going to be a great addition to our team just because we're all looking for another guy to bounce some bookkeeping slash accounting slash forensic accounting that you're probably pretty good uh underneath everybody's belt there. So, well, like we normally do on these calls, I normally don't have an agenda out of the gate. I kind of just go over what people's questions are, what thoughts are going on. Again, we've been doing this. This is the first one I think we've even done that's been during business hours because sometimes I had a couple of texts from, members and were like, hey man, I can't, I've got kids, whatever. The thing is, I can't make it during the evening times. We were doing like 6 to 7 central. So I'm going to try and play around with some time, see if maybe the lunchtime is better for some people too, from like 12 to 1 o'clock central, just to try and just be as accommodating as I can to everybody. So, but I did want to go into today. One thing that has been, at least on my mind, is, you know, we talk a lot about how to find the deal, how to, the assemble or let me get this guy off here. Zach's otter pilot keeps texting. The assemble the team, acquire the property, leverage it, and then multiply. That's kind of the habit that we've got that I think is what sets the tone for our real estate, how we build out our portfolio. What I think a big piece of this is not really knowing how to, out of the gate, what are the actual steps from start to finish. So what I ended up doing, and another thing is too, I don't know, some of you guys have, I believe, already met with Zane. I think Zane's on here. I don't know, Zane, if you're on here, say hey.
I
Yeah.
am on here. I'm just
Okay.
doing
Hey man.
some work in the background here.
Okay, cool. So one thing that again, like we started implementing this week is the one-on-ones with Zane, kind of our acquisition coach, basically, and going over where everybody is in their kind of journey right now, what their goals are, and then starting to work backward into finding a way to do it. So one thing that we've been talking about, and I've been trying, and we can make this a little bit more fancy. And I just put this also, if you guys are pulling up on your own Google Sheet, this is in there now. This is just steps from A to Z. And it's looking a little overwhelming out of the gate, but what this is, I've tried to break down the steps from finding from someone that does not own a piece of real estate all the way down to closing that piece of real estate and what the next steps look like. So I won't dive into all of this. You guys can look at this yourself, but I think this will be a big piece. And Zane, if you wanted to give me your opinion on this too, but anybody that would like to have Zane on as, just kind of running next to you again, what this does is I think it just gives somebody a outline of where they are currently and then what they need to do. Like, what is the next logical step in where a person is? Like, so again, if we're looking from, the very beginning, calling brokers from LoopNet or leasing signs around town, right? That's a pretty standard way to start to drive some traffic towards you, because again, the biggest piece that I've discovered again is not trying to look for properties on LoopNet or Crexy, but really trying to find brokers and people that are in the real estate business, because it goes back, like if Zane, who's in Birmingham, if Zane is trying to find 10 to 25,000 square feet of industrial real estate in 60 miles around Birmingham, he's not getting it. He's not getting the deal. I'm getting the deal, because I've got the brokers that are sniffing the ground to find the deal. So the most important piece, of course, that's why I say having that broker and assembling the team is the most important piece, not necessarily finding the property, because you're most likely not going to find it, because you're competing against guys that are a little bit further along on this timeline. But just going down the way, you can see it's going into the actual step by step of what a property looks like from start to finish. So I put that in the Google Drive so you guys can see that, and then I think it just helps you look in the mirror and figure out kind of where you are as an individual and what you're trying to do in your next logical step.
And
So
I'll chime in as well.
Yeah.
And it's basically just like the entire point of this thing. And I just told somebody in that acquisition program, this is just a second ago, that if you check every single one of these boxes, you are guaranteed to have a commercial property under your belt. And what we do every time we get on a call is in that column C over there. That's your progress column. Okay, so I'll check a box and write out the progress, and you tell me your progress that you've had over the past week. And then in column D, right next to it, is your action column. So right there, I'll put exactly what actions that we agree on our call that we think are the logical, like Nolan said, the logical best steps to take next week. And then when we get together the next week on our next call, we're just going to go over the same thing, your progress on the steps that we went over last week, and then the action steps for the next week. And it's really just laid out there, right? Perfectly laid out there for you. So you don't even have to think about, what do I do next? Where do I go next? What are the next steps? Like, let me ask Nolan. Instead, you can just sit here and look and see exactly what your next steps are going to be.
And just to totally be clear, and again, I'm not just talking to Grant or Jared or Dustin's autopilot. This is to everybody who's going to watch the recording of this. I want to be clear that this is not some type of you need to do this, you need to do that. This is just simply I hope to be a way for everybody that's joined our group to squeeze the most juice out of this membership. That's really the whole point of this. So it's not so much to Zane to be like, oh, okay, this is what next action step that we agreed that you would take. It's more about like, hey man, a person signed up to be a part of this. We just want to do everything that we can to help you make that next logical move and the next logical action step for you to take. So it's never a derogatory call. It's never a derogatory or a talking down or anything like that. It's always just, I just give a shit, and I know Zane cares, and I just want to help people succeed. And so this just feels like the easiest and logical move to help guys that are trying to figure out, okay, I know that I want to be in commercial. I know that I want to own 10,000 square feet. I know that I want to do all this. Okay, so what do I do next? Because sometimes I've been there before where you've got all these different things and all this different information coming from left and right, and it can be overwhelming, and so much so that it just paralyzes you that you don't know what to do next, so you just don't do anything. And so this is why we kind of created this step by step. That way, when we're going down this little yellow brick road, we can say, okay, so what have we done so far? Let's assess what we've done, where we're at. Okay, cool. We've checked that box. We understand where we are. Now, when you're having that conversation with Zane, or if you don't want to take up Zane at all, you can at least look and say, okay, where am I? And what next logical, actionable step can I take in order to get down here to, line number 46, which is negotiating with the tenant from a building that you just closed to extend their lease. That's really what the whole set of this thing is just trying to get from start to finish. So if you guys have questions or thoughts from Zane or I or whatever on this little thing, I think I think this is just an important piece that even for myself that, when we're on the property and the project that we're working on right now, that a couple of you guys have already engaged to be a part of. What we are doing in the most important pieces for me is, because again, I have never developed a piece of real estate before. I've rehabbed a ton of them, but never from the ground up. So I've taken a step back and worked with my broker, Sam, who a lot of you have met, is Sam, let's break this dang thing down to step by step to what is the next logical step. Once we engage a civil engineer, okay, What are we going to do with that civil engineer? Okay, got it. So I'm going to go out there. We're going to talk about the Alta survey. What is all included in Alta survey, and why is that an important piece to have? What does the topography graph look like? All the back and the forth from the step by step by step, because once you're able to break that down into, I would say, digestible pieces, I just think it's going to allow you to gain more confidence. For me, it will, at least, even in my own, in this deal that we can talk more about, if someone has questions on, we can kind of dive into this, the underwriting and everything. But I know for me, when I first, this is just me being transparent for a second. It's when when this deal first popped up, this big development opportunity, I was intimidated, and not necessarily much afraid, but just like intimidated from the size of the deal and something that I've never done before. But I know in my gut that this is the next logical move, right? It's the same thing. If you guys own a couple residential properties, then you own an apartment building, and then you're like, okay, I can't keep accumulating all these units because I'm just getting a larger headache every week. Then you go, okay, the next logical move is commercial. So for me, it was, okay, the next logical move was to find a piece of real estate to develop. And I didn't know the first thing about it, but then I started doing the same thing that I did before when I bought my first house. I started buying coffees and lunches for every single person that I knew that had bought multi-million dollar real estate, had developed pieces of real estate, learned the steps in all the people in their circle. And what that does, at least for me, what it did for me is every time I had a conversation, it gave me a tick of more confidence, to where it was like, okay, this guy has done this deal. This guy said it's not that difficult. Here's what you do. Here's the steps. And I took a little piece from that, took another piece from this, met with this civil. This is what you do next. Okay, met with this contractor. And you start to piece it together, and it's like, okay, this is digestible. This is, this is not difficult to do because other people have done it. And now I'm seeing what each next step looks like along this, again, yellow brick road. So for me as an individual, and for you guys, when you're trying to buy your first property or your fifth property or whatever it is, having a timeline and a set of steps to go down and to just see, okay, where am I? What's the next piece? What's the next step? I just feel for myself, it creates a more confidence to do more deals, because you actually know where to go next after you complete a previous step. So that's the reason why Zane and I made this. And then, of course, this is the main reason why Zane is a part of our team now, is because it's easy to see where you are on this, but it's also difficult because there's a lot of steps, and sometimes one can be more difficult than the next. And Zane just hopefully is going to allow you to confine in somebody to figure out, okay, how do I take that next step to get from, line number 12 to line number 20? What does that look like? That kind of thing. So that's kind of why and how we're doing this, is because I'm trying to have everybody, if it sounds funny, but like live vicariously through me a little bit, the same way maybe others have through their own kids, or their parents did through their son or whatever. But I'm like, if I can show, I mean, Zane and I were going over this. I'm like, okay, let me go back through every single step of a deal that I did, and let me just see what exactly I had to do to get from start to finish. So I just started writing all this stuff down. So we'll probably add to this maybe a little bit more as time goes on, but I've tried to break it down to where you can have a logical next step and probably knock out a couple of these in like even the same day, that kind of thing. So
Noah, can I jump in real fast?
yeah, that'd be great.
Because,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because I think this is kind of game changing, to be honest with you, only because as you're trying to figure out these things, there's so many pieces to this. And I think part of the effectiveness of being able to do these things is to do them in a logical order. Because I can tell you, in some of the deals that I've tried to put together, I've done some of these in way the reverse order, and I've had a less than ideal response, right? So I think this, to me, puts it in a way that makes it usable, that even so as myself, but even someone who's just literally opening the cover off of commercial real estate can look at this, and it's very logical, it's very progressive. And I think, Zane was basically saying, yeah, if you check every one of these boxes, you've got a deal basically imminent, right? And I think that's just it. If you can follow a sort of a checklist approach. I'm a huge fan of checklists, but this is a real good
Oh
book.
yeah, nice.
So just funny
Oh.
how this came up. So Zane, you were kind of like, we're like Unagi on that one. But
Nice.
I think that this can really make a huge difference on all of us being able to put this in motion. So I appreciate putting this all together this way.
Yeah, that's great. And I can appreciate somebody that's in the checklist too, because I'm like the same way, especially like the night before. Maybe you're like, okay, I got to do these 15 things tomorrow, whatever. And it's a little bit of instant gratification too, I would say. When you're vacuuming or mowing the yard, it's like being able to check these boxes. It's like, okay, hey, I've accomplished something, and it gives you again more confidence in the compounding of like, success, that hey, I can keep doing this, I can keep doing this, and you're able to move kind of down the line. So right now, this is about as it's pretty much completed. I've tried to break it down even more if I possibly could. There's maybe a couple more things, like even on number 10 here where I'm talking about important metrics. I could probably do a one-off with like 10 more about how to make sure which metrics they are and why they're important and what you need to make sure you hit. And maybe I'll do that. But for the most part, receive an accepted offer, interview a real estate attorney, retain an attorney, have your attorney. Like these things you can knock all this stuff out in like 3 days, that kind of thing. It's very digestible. That's what I want. I don't want this to feel like it's overwhelming. And so everybody can be able to see, okay, this is the next logical step. This is the next step for this. And they can, even right here where it says, submit a LOI on a deal at 70% of intrinsic value. Well, that just means that when we go back over here to our Google Drive, we pop in that's the wrong one, wherever it is. We pop into our folder, or the 70% rule, we can pop that wherever that is. Damn it. Offer calculator. I don't know. I don't even know which ones are in. Here it is. Yeah, exactly. So our offer calculator. So you can pop that in. You'll be able to know, what your highest and best offer would be. So when you're looking at your steps and you're seeing, okay, so submit a LOI on a deal at 70% of intrinsic value. Okay. So then you can go back to the Google Drive and you can pull up the 70% offer calculator and you can say, okay, what are the 4 most important metrics of this deal? Okay. We've got 13,000 feet. Or let's say we're looking at a deal, it's 17,000 feet. We know the market cap rate's, let's say 8.75%. We know that we can get $7 a foot, and we're probably going to have to put $210,000 into this project. Well, if we know, that means the intrinsic value of this property, and I'll just walk back through how we get to this number. So you guys can actually see all of these. But again, the way we find intrinsic value, if you remember, it's our net operating income divided by our market cap rate. That's the way you discover the intrinsic value. So we multiply 17,000 square feet by how much rent we're able to earn. So that's going to equal, I don't even know what that number would be. But then we take those two numbers and we divide that by our market cap rate. So that's how that number is thrown off at 1.36 million. And the intrinsic value, essentially, if you want to even say intrinsic value also / appraised value, that's what your appraiser is going to come back and look at that number. We just multiply this number by intrinsic value by 0.7. Then we subtract our projected rehab costs. And then on top of it, we also subtract our leasing commissions, because that's going to also be included, especially if it's a vacant warehouse. Okay. So we're going to have to pay somebody, because I'm not going to be leasing that property. I'm going to be calling somebody else to lease it. So once you just, again, drop all of these costs off, you're going to see that your highest and best offer is $715,000 on this particular random deal, right? But just to understand, just to kind of go back to the step, and I'm not going to try and ramble. I'm just trying to like show how I would think about this, so you guys can, think this maybe the same way. Remember, when you find a vacant warehouse and the intrinsic value is 1.36 million, when it's all leased up and it's all rehabbed and we got the market cap rate and all this stuff is the way that we anticipate, or we have all this information based upon our team that we've built, right? We know that the market cap rate's 8.75 because our broker or because somebody else had just recently sold a property at that rate. So you can discover what that number is. You've got your leasing agent that says when you spend $210,000 in rehab because of the contractor that you've, engaged, that he gave you a scope of work on, so that's the number. And your leasing agent says, hey, I know we'll be able to get $7 a foot if you spend this amount of money on this size of space. So you have all of these metrics that are pretty set in stone because of the team that's around you. And then what that's going to do is spit off all of these metrics. But the biggest piece that you have to remember is most people would look at that and say, how the heck would somebody buy a property that's worth $1.36 million? Why would somebody sell it for $700,000 basically? And you have to remember that most of these sellers, and not every one of them, but if they're tied up in a trust, if there's a situation with an owner that's maybe absentee, out of state or whatever, and it's vacant, it's costing them money at this point. The intrinsic value, remember, of commercial is the net operating income, where residential, on the other hand, if you got, we've said it before, but 10 houses in a cul-de-sac going for 200,000, that 11th one, whether it's vacant or whether it's occupied or whether it needs a ton of rehab or not, it's most likely going to go for around that same value. So to come full circle, the highest and best offer of $700,000, that seller might not really know the intrinsic value. He doesn't know how much rehab is necessary. He doesn't know what the market rent per foot is. He hadn't probably looked around and seen what buildings are trading for. So all he knows is maybe the size of his building, and it might not even be accurate. Maybe he's even under renting it before. So because you have more information and you have the right guys on your team, you're going to be able to have a much better idea of what you can purchase the property for. And then to really come full circle, after you've put all the money in, you've rehabbed it, everything like that, then you'll be able to do one of those cash out refis that they talk on Bigger Pockets and pull out all that equity that you initially injected. And then you can just rinse and repeat all that same cash flow or the same cash that you put into it before. So what I'm getting at though is that each step of the way here, and maybe I'll even add like a little tip on here and say, hey, pull up, make sure to use, the 70% offer calc, or whatever, something along those lines. That way that every single step of the way, you'll know, okay, I need to go into Google Drive and I need to pull this up and I need to run the numbers this way. So I think at the end of the day, really what I'm hoping to at least provide to everybody is not the work out in the field, the boots on the ground, but really it's, okay, everybody is capable of accomplishing and doing this. And here are the steps and all of the tools in order to do it. You don't have to go and make this 70% calculator. You don't have to go and make, the pro forma to run your numbers. You don't have to worry about the proposal for finance because it's already in our template. Like all of those pieces to these steps, every piece that is a part of this, you already have. Like it's all a part of, the step by step of this program, or of the steps from A to Z. You have all of the pro formas, all the proposal for financings, all the templates that you need to get you from A to B, instead of like you get to step 13 and submitting an LOI and you don't have one. Well, it's already in our Google Drive. So you have everything already. So just trying to make it as simple as possible so everybody can gain confidence to be able to take the next step logically, if that makes sense. So, all right. Does anybody have any like questions or thoughts about this? We've been, again, kind of working on it. I want if anybody has questions on like something that they're working on a property or anything that they are trying to do, if I can give some advice or walk through some numbers on a pro forma or anything like that. Because if not, I mean, I can always kind of we can always do a case study of a property. We can always do more underwriting. Again, I don't want to go more or less over what we've already, done in the past or what you guys have access to already. I just want to make sure that if you guys have questions or thoughts, I can do it live to make sure that you get your questions answered. You know what I mean? Okay. Would it be beneficial or helpful for me to, for those that are in our, in the raise for this development deal, the good news is that we've submitted this lease already on the vacant property, on the vacant land. So that's going to be, this has actually been submitted, not with not updated terms yet, but it's been submitted to them with basically saying, hey, we'll do the deal at the 10% of what it costs to acquire and to build. And so we're going to hear back from them probably like later this week. We've engaged a civil engineer. I think I mentioned we've got a guy getting out there, a surveyor doing an Alta survey, which is just kind of like, if you can equate it to the strength of like a deed, it's like a warranty deed. It's like, this is exactly what type of, these are the meets and bounds of this property, all that kind of stuff. So we're working that. And then hopefully we'll be getting some topography, making sure the utilities are out there and moving the deal forward. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. I'm really excited about kind of where things are heading on this. So does anybody have, again, I don't want to talk more or less over something or more over something else. I just want to make sure I'm crystal clear on, or at least I'm giving everybody all the steps and the information that they need to, to move forward with Zane, to move forward, and to know where they are on, the steps from not knowing where you are to closing the deal.
I have kind of a question.
Yeah, hit me. It's awesome.
So I mean, I like how I get to kind of see what people are working on privately, and I don't want to I want to keep everybody kind of anonymous unless they want to talk about it. But anyways, one question that somebody had was kind of like, what are some of the advantages if you're negotiating with a seller who's an owner occupant versus a seller who's just an occupant, or somebody who's just owns the building without occupying the building? So are there any advantages to having an owner occupant that you're buying from?
So just to be clear, so asking what's the difference between, or is there an advantage between having a owner occupant, like someone that's a glass supply guy, he owns his own building, versus somebody that's a landlord like me, and the tenant is a glass supply company and you're buying it?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
landlord?
like if the owner of the building is occupying the space and maybe they're selling their business and they're selling the business and the building at the same time, is there some kind of leverage or some kind of need that you can satisfy there?
Well, I think one of the biggest keys on that is on the similar deal on Jefferson on the big 27,000 square foot warehouse that had the mezzanine in it. For those that came to the live event that we walked in, we met the tenant, Tom, and everything. That property was a prime example of why seller financing, the down payment is is a huge aspect in a big piece to that deal, because that tenant or that owner not only sold his business to this Tom guy, but he also sold the building to me. So he just liquidated everything, right? He no longer has any assets. If you think about it, maybe he's got some stocks and some money in a checking account or whatever, but he doesn't own any assets anymore. Okay. So the way that I position that, and I think this is for my personal opinion, one of the biggest pieces to the seller financing, is because when you understand what that seller's position is, and he knows that he's trying to cash out, he just needs a war chest. That money now, especially if he's an older cat, especially if he's in his 60s and he knows he's probably has, let's say 62 years old, and he knows he probably has 30 years left on this earth, maybe 25 years, right? Whatever it is. and he's got 3 million in an account now, and let's say it's interest bearing or whatever, but he's got 25 years to go, he's basically just trying to outlive his money at that, or he's trying to have his money outlive him. If you really think about it, like he's got all this money in a war chest, and then none of it's new money coming in. Maybe he's got some interest that's throwing off on it, but the way you structure and position that again is the tax piece might be important to him. You know, it normally is, especially when you sell those things, the business and the property. But what most people don't think about that you can really hammer down on is you're not going to have any new money coming in. Again, you're not making any new sales. Like you just sold everything. You sold everything. So you have no new money coming in. Therefore, you've got this big war chest, but now it's just old money at this point. It's just starting to collect dust and it's starting to dwindle down the more Mai Tais that you drink on the beach. Versus when you go in position, again, you financing the down payment because they want to have that bigger lump sum of cash. So that's when the bank is fine because the seller's taking a second position. But you show them how, hey, remember, you're selling your business, you're selling your property, you're not going to have any new money coming in. You're having no new, like, and you hammer that point. And that's when you mention, look, you leave money in this deal. You never say seller mortgages, never seller finance. It's always leave money in the deal. And let me show you how much new money that you can make every month by leaving money in this deal. And that's when that seller financing calculator pops up that you guys have, right? Proposal for financing template. I mean, that's not it. It's one of these. It's on here somewhere. Proposal for financing, seller financing. Here it is. You know, the seller financing template. You pull this up and you show them, hey, you can do this deal the traditional way, which is the normal way that we do it. We'll do it this way. And that's where I say, hey, let's make sure that, you know, I can do this deal the normal way. It's not a big deal. This guy's name was Larry. And I said, yeah, Larry Gardner's his name. And I say, if you do it this way, it's no big deal. Just look at to where I may have changed some of these numbers. Yeah, I've changed a lot of these since then, but it doesn't matter. But if you do this a different way, look at how much new money that you're going to have come in, you know, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I have to redo all this stuff, but that's not the point. The point is that you have the tools here to be able to whip out a one pager and show the seller like, hey, look, there really is a better solution to this deal than maybe what you're currently doing. So now on the, you know, the investor side, they might have different motivation because they're investors. So they're going to have other cash flow coming in. Maybe the capital gains tax might be the most important piece, right? So I think that's where the discovery with the seller, and, you know, some people have said, well, I don't know if the broker wants me to talk with him or whatever. And it's like, I don't give a shit. I'm talking to the seller. Like I will find that seller and I will talk with him. There's no way that I'm just only going through the brokers. I'm not going to say something to Sam. I'm not going to have Sam say something to Sonny and Sonny say something to Larry. And then it gets telephoned back. Like that's so, I mean, it's a waste of time when I can go straight over to that business and talk directly with Larry. So, but basically just doing the discovery on the back end or on the front end and understanding what their motivation to sell and then what are they going to do like later on. I don't know. Does that answer your question, Zane?
No, yeah, that's great. Like I was saying, I just kind of trying to make sure I ask questions that are applicable to our coaching calls.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's great. And I think as you know, like anybody else, I mean, you would be new to somebody and that maybe have been in here a lot longer or they're further along or behind or whatever. I think as the relationship, you know, with you as our acquisition coach kind of grows and builds, it's going to allow maybe people to get maybe a little bit more open, a little more vulnerable. Like, hey, this is really what I'm struggling with. This is really what I'm trying to accomplish next. You can kind of consult with them on like, hey, this is a good next step on something that you can do. So, yeah, I mean, again, I don't want to waste anybody's time. I just want to make sure that I'm going over, you know, everything that that you guys need from me in order to take actionable steps. So I don't want to hammer down only on this A to Z, but Zane and I have been working on this for, almost a month now, and I've been trying to break down. And if you guys don't mind, I'd like maybe some feedback on this, where you walk through this and you have like, hey, I might need a little more clarification on this, or, when I'm like, for example, number 10, maybe I can clean this up and say, okay, all these metrics and stuff. Okay. What does that look like? That kind of thing. And so even if we did that, you can pull right up to your calculator and get an overview quickly. You have all these metrics very quickly to be able to pull up and run the numbers to make sure that the deal, makes sense. You have all of these important, when you're looking at this pro forma, it can be overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff that comes into it. I'm very familiar with this, or I'm very understanding of that. But know that when you pop in these blue numbers, you're going to be able to see an overview of what these most important, metrics really are on a deal. You'll have all of this stuff right here on this second overview page. So when you're running the numbers and you're going back from steps from A to Z, you'll have all of these caps, intrinsic, discard, cash on cash, rent per foot. You'll have all of those metrics ready to pop up. So you don't have to go and like find those through all like 7 of these pages. So again, I want to make it as easy as possible for you guys to get down those steps and as quickly as possible, because out of the gate, it's finding the property is maybe a 50% of it, but the other 50%, you think, okay, the 50% of it is underwriting the deal and checking these boxes, right? Or submitting an LOI. That might be 50% of a deal. And then the other 50% is going through these other, 40 or 30, steps after you've got the property under contract. So I just want to provide you guys with as much information as possible, so you can skate from 1 to 46 as quickly as possible. So, I added another piece to this. I need to figure out where this is. One thing, I've been following this guy, John McClellan or something like that. I have to remember I've been following him on YouTube, whatever. He's a big developer. And I need to figure out where I put this thing, but there is a really good thing. If you're buying a property, here it is. If you're buying a property that's currently occupied, for example, our deal in Leeds that were with the JCB Orbis tenant, one of the biggest pieces that you can do is called requesting a tenant estoppel. Has anybody heard of that before, or like ever requested one of those pieces before? Because I had never heard of this until I was following this guy. Have you guys ever heard of that before? I'm just curious. Okay.
That'd be a negative.
Yeah. So a tenant estoppel, so you have a landlord estoppel and a tenant estoppel. Well, a landlord estoppel essentially just means I go and ask the current landlord when I buy this property, hey, is everything square and tight between you and the tenant? And he's going to say, yes, absolutely. We're ready to go. Everything is great between us, right? And he's just warranting that everything in the current lease is up to date. Now, a tenant estoppel is another legal contract that you can have your attorney draft, or I'll have my guy draft it and I'll put it in our group because I'm doing it on this Leeds deal. But what it does is it goes to the tenant and says, hey, I know you guys signed a lease 3 years ago or 13 years ago or whatever the current lease is. Is that all currently up to date? Do you guys have a side handshake? Is there a rent holiday coming up where you don't have to pay this landlord for 3 years? Is there something that you guys had a conversation and said, hey, I'll fix the roof, but it's not going to be for another 9 months? And you guys had this handshake deal or something on the side that wasn't included in the lease. And so what that tenant estoppel document says is it brings everything to light, opens all the doors, and the tenant has the ability to say to the purchaser and say, well, our landlord said that he's going to fix the roof, he's going to put new gutters on, or he is giving us 3 months of no rent, or whatever the situation is, right? Whatever they had agreed on. And then once that comes to light, that allows you, number one, even if if your earnest money had gone hard at that point, if if you passed through due diligence, you're going through inspection, whatever, you're able to renege on the deal. You're able to get back out of it, because that means that the landlord is not warranting over the updated lease. There weren't addendums to the lease so he wasn't warranting, the current lease. So what this tenant estoppel does, it allows the tenant to like come clean if there's something going sideways between the landlord and him, if they've got claims or liens against him or whatever. Or it just says, hey, no, everything's great. It's totally up to code, or we're totally up to speed. They sign that. And then after you close, they can't come back and say, oh, well, my landlord said we had 3 months off. You can say, no, you signed that estoppel saying that we were all on the same page. And so that whatever you had before him is no longer there. So that's a new, I would say for me as a landlord, that's a new piece that when I'm going to sell something or I'm going to buy something or whatever, this is a really important piece that I'm adding kind of to my repertoire, my tool belt for a really, an important step to getting from, property under contract to property closing. So something that you guys can put kind of, in your tool belt as well. I hadn't really learned much about that until I studied it and was like, man, that's a good point. Cause you might have a lease in place, but as long as they have something going the sideways, another handshake that says they can or can't do something. I think the tenant estoppel is just another great piece just to add into it. So more information on this thing, I guess. Another piece on this thing, I have it on here somewhere. Here it is, number 23. Receive, and this is, I don't want to tell people what to do or anything. I just want to give advice really as to ways that the things that I'm doing, right? Like you guys are a part of this because you're wanting to learn. And so I'm just trying to show you things that I'm personally doing that you guys can also do. So when I'm saying receive LOI and sign lease agreement, the leases, the title exceptions, the tenant correspondence, notices from the city, all that stuff, all these things, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you do not hire a consultant or, maybe an attorney to make sure the legal documents are correct, but make sure that you read through this yourself. I would encourage, I hate the word encourage, but I would recommend you guys, when you have a property under contract, that you personally read through the lease yourself. And if there is if you're building something or you are there's an issue, a defect on the title, the length of the leases, I think it's really important for you as an individual to read through that. Number one, I think it makes you really competent in understanding the language and the relationship with your tenant and the agreement that you have, or at least that you are absorbing or you're inheriting from the current landlord. But also too, I think, the more, let me see what I was going to say here. Yeah, do it yourself. So another piece with the lease, I think I've told this story before, but with one of the first buildings that I bought, it was 70,000 square feet. I bought this property, and the lease I just had a brand new baby. I was up literally in the middle of the night, like just finding something to do. I was reading through a freaking lease, like, cause I was just trying to find something to do, and I was awake. I'm reading through this like 26-page lease. And at the time I was renting, and this is to reiterate the point, to read everything. When I bought the property, I saw that the rent was throwing off $13,000 a month or whatever the property was. But it was at the time, the current landlord was receiving $13,000 and he was paying the expenses out of that $13,000. Okay. Well, then once we closed on the deal, I didn't have a tenant estoppel. I didn't have any of this stuff, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I just pulled the trigger to hear the gun go off. Once I was reading through this lease, I noticed that even though I thought it was a triple net lease, he wasn't reimbursing for taxes and insurance. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, there's like, I mean, the taxes on this building is like $18,000 a year. And then the insurance is also like $15,000 a year. Okay. So if you really think about it, like I was being shortchanged by like 30 grand on this one property. And so I emailed this guy's name is Steve. He's a super nice guy. But to come full circle, I emailed Steve. I said, hey, you need to review this lease or have your attorney look at it because, you agreed to this and I haven't received that. I'm not going to try and go back and like recapture anything. I just wanted to say moving forward that, you're paying me what is in our lease and what we agreed on. And sure enough, he responded, was like, you're absolutely right. This is totally accurate. And so now he's, the rent went from $13,000 in a little bit of change, and we're making like $18,200 a month now. And that's not straight to my bottom line. I'm paying taxes and insurance out of some of that, but now my net income went up like $4,500 a month because before I was paying those expenses. I was putting those in my escrow account to pay all my taxes and insurance later. And now I'm just making 4,100 extra bucks a month on the deal just because I read through the lease and I was not necessarily trying to poke holes in it, but trying to make sure I understood and I was making sure I read it properly. So that's my biggest, I don't know, just another piece of advice is just try and read everything yourself. Don't necessarily hire a third party out or have an attorney just read through it because they're not going to know the exact situation of what you're in. And sometimes too, I think it just helps with education too. I think, it allows you to become more familiar with all the terms and you end up becoming a much more sophisticated investor because you understand, your rights, their rights, and the relationship that you have with the tenant. So that's just another, I don't know, piece of advice that I think that I would have. So let me ask you guys, is this time work for you guys? I don't want to cut short. We can talk more about, I'd like to get into maybe even before we go kind of the syndication ways that we're drafting I've done them a couple different ways. If you guys had questions about that, I've done, syndication deals where we've done 50-50 equity splits between me as a general partner and the limited partners get 50%, but they get 100% of the cash flow until they get their principal back. And then what I've discovered too is another really easy way, because you might have studied or heard about like, waterfall models and things like that. I don't really want to get all into the weeds on it, but what we're doing on our current deal, and this is just maybe a more typical way of syndicating real estate, which of course is just pooling capital together to buy something. But the term on our deal now that you guys can do when you guys are starting to raise capital on deals is having a 30-70% equity split. So if it's $1 million building, hypothetically, and the bank brings $750,000, the limited partner would show up with $250,000, or which the down payment is. And candidly, the general partner can also purchase in on the limited partner side as well. It just allows him to get more equity if he wanted to. But the general partner will get 30% of the equity in the building. The limited partner gets 70% equity. I've found that the most common number is 7.5%. I'm trying to make sure I'm just doing it right middle, cut down the fairway of how everybody's doing it. And so they get a 7.5% preferred return and then a 50-50 split of the promote. So let me explain that really quickly. So just so everyone's clear, if we bought this property, let's just say for $1 million, and then the next day they sold it for $2 million, right? Forget commissions, forget everything. There's $1 million of profit, okay? The investor is going to get their initial $250,000 back of principal, and then there's $1 million of capital gain. The investor or the limited partner receives $700,000 in capital gains. The general partner, which again is responsible for every piece of the day-to-day, they're out there on the site working with the contractors. They're out there working with the tenant. They're submitting the ACHs. They're worried about the debt service. They're relationshiping with the bankers. Like they're doing kind of all the work on the ground. And so their commission essentially is the 30% equity. So if there's $1 million of profit, the investor gets back their 250 and then 700 grand, and then the general partner would receive 300,000. That's his equity in the deal on the capital gain side. Let's say though that you don't sell it the next day and you just cash flow it. So you put up $1 million, or the deal is $1 million. Let's say I'm just using the roundest numbers possible. Someone puts up $1 million as a limited partner, and the cash flow is $100,000. So that would equate to a 10% return if they did the deal by themselves, right? So what this shows though is that instead, because the limited partner didn't have to spend any time finding the deal, finding the financing, finding the tenant, submitting any of the proposal for financings, doing any of the work, they just showed up and they started collecting cash flow. The general partner is doing all of that. The limited partner will receive a 7.5% preferred return, which just means that they get their money before anybody else does. So they put up $1 million, $75,000 comes in cash flow after debt service. They receive that $75,000 before anybody else. After that, whatever is left over, it kind of like a waterfall bucket. So if you got one bucket here and one bucket here, once this first bucket fills up with $75,000, remember there's 100 grand of cash flow, the extra 25,000 trickles into the next bucket. Now, the first bucket is the preferred return, or the pref, of 7.5%, or 75 grand in that case. And then the extra $25,000 is described as the promote. So what that promote does is that is split 50-50 between the general partner and the limited partner. So the limited partner would receive 12,500, and the limited partner receives 12,500. So that way, again, just to do the math, the limited partner's cash on cash return that year would be 8.75%, because he received $87,500 on his $1 million of deposit. While the general partner, who again did his commission on that, would be $12,500, if that kind of correlation makes sense. So just to be clear, that's how a lot of these syndicates are constructed and drawn up by attorneys, and how the cash flow works. It's a simple waterfall model that where when the money flows in the first bucket and it hits the cap, which is the preferred return, or the pref, the rest of the promote, or the excess cash flow, funnels into the next bucket, which is called the promote. And that's split between the general partner and the limited partner 50-50. So when you guys, just so you guys can see on that 34th line, when you guys are potentially raising money, when you get down to this line on a deal, it's very simple. It's a very simple model. And maybe I'll do a little video, like an illustration on that, so you guys can see it, how we're doing it and how we'll do this in the future. But that's like a typical way that some of these really large funds will construct, will basically construct these syndicates. So, but yeah, that's kind of, again, I don't want to be just talking the whole time like that, but I kind of did. Does anybody have like thoughts or questions kind of like on the time of this, if this is convenient for everyone, if it's not convenient, if there's a better time? I just want it to be where as many people as possible can jump on our calls. And because I know everybody I speak with normally is like, hey, I watched the replay, it was great, or whatever. But I just want to make sure that I can get as many people's questions answered, or whatever's on everyone's mind is lively as possible. So anybody have thoughts on that before we get out?
Yeah, Nolan, I wonder if there might be an opportunity for us to put in like, I don't know, almost like a first choice, second choice, third choice, almost like a Survey Monkey or something.
Okay.
And put in a bit of a printout to kind of see what rises to the top in terms of the most common times that seem like are in the first or second choice options, kind of overlay those. But, I think I appreciate the fact that you're making this available at different times of the day, because typically the 6 o'clock works great for me, but wouldn't have worked great this week. This actually worked better. So I appreciate you kind of trying to figure out multiple options to try to get many people kind of to be able to do this live, because I think that's preferred, right? You can watch it after, it's great, but when you can interact, it's always better.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. So let me do this then. What I'll do is before I set the time for our next call, I'm gonna email everybody. I'll put it in school, but I'll email everyone too. Just like you said, a survey, whatever, like a Google survey or whatever it's called, and get everybody's just opinion. And I'll just hammer down to say, hey, I need you guys to respond to this thing. That way I can at least get a better understanding. Because if you only get 3 or 4 people that say, hey, this time works, or this time doesn't, well, then we'll just do what we normally do, that kind of thing. I just want to be accommodating. That's really what it is. And I know Zane is feeling the same way on that. So, but if that works, I hope that this was helpful. I know that at the end of the day, we didn't do a ton of, deal underwriting, but I also think it's important just to see, what we have coming on the horizon, and having that, check boxes and timelines of what we can do and what actions that we can take today, because that's really what it's all about is we can, this is my philosophical thing, but it's everybody can go to a meetup and feel like they are, being productive, but really they're just being busy. And I don't ever want to be busy. I want to be taking action in something that's actually producing a result. And so I want to believe that doing, even like for number 7, for example, sending bankers your tax returns and in personal financial statements. It's like, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but now that a bank has financially underwritten you as an individual, I mean, when you have an opportunity and they're like, yeah, we're ready to go. I mean, how much quicker can you pull the trigger on something if you already have a bank that's fucking ready to roll with you, So that, I mean, these little things that don't seem like just another line on the page, but it's like, man, there's just an opportunity to really like, where you see where you are and you see what the next logical step is, you can start to map out and gain confidence. Like, hey, I know where I'm supposed to be next week. And after I get on that phone with Zane, I know what I need to do to accomplish this week to move my career of investing forward. So that's kind of where we're at with this. And I'm hoping that we all, take some advantage of it. So.
And I'll add something to that as well.
Yeah.
Of course you could do this on your own, and I would obviously encourage it. But I think having another human being on the other side of the phone, like with you every step of the way and every single week, it just keeps you engaged, and it actually keeps you engaged in actually doing the things every week, not just saying that you're going to do them, or not just checking, or not just like typing out that you're going to do these actions. Like, you have another human being right here who is willing to work with you every single week and talk to you about what you're doing. I'm super interested, just personally, in like how you guys are doing throughout this process, and I'm super interested to just dive into this with you guys and work with you guys to actually get you guys what you came here to get. And so I think keeping you engaged is another huge part of the acquisition program, not just the steps, but being engaged into it as well.
Agreed. 100% agreed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, good, guys. I appreciate everyone making it today. I know we didn't have a ton of cats on because, again, we're trying to figure out the best timing for everything, but stay in it. Stay in it. I think that's the biggest key, that we're all like, sometimes when someone, starts up doing something, you get really excited about it. Zane and I talk about it a lot. Like, how can we keep people to like not be motivated, because I'm not a motivation guy. I just like, we just want people to stay like excited about what they're doing, and being able to see the next steps and have something action positive happen. I'm telling you, like, it will re-engage and like it will spark that like excitement again. It's remarkable. Like, I'm doing a refinance. I'm closing it actually on Thursday, and that's going to be a big refi. Actually, if you guys were at the live when, it's that building that we did all that work to and had the cool floors and stuff. I'm refinancing that building on Thursday, and it's going to be a big one. And so that's a little thing in the grand scheme of things, but it's like, hey, I saw something through. I was pissed off at the tenants. We couldn't figure it out. We were back and forth, but like now it's all coming together. And it's like, for me, it's just motivating to be like, damn, you guys can do the same thing. It's not that hard. It just takes the logical next steps to actually get there. And that's why I think Zane and I are really just passionate about trying to help you guys feel the same way we do about what we're doing with y'all, if that makes sense. So that's okay. Now after my little sermon, I need a tithe. That's what I tell my dad. But all right, y'all. Well, you guys have a good week. Again, I'll shoot like a little email and stuff out on school, and we can just figure out what the next best times are. And if you guys need anything, text us, Zane and I, call us, whatever. Let's set up an individual call, whatever we can do to help you guys kind of make that next move. Okay.
Hey, Nolan, do you care to stick around for just 1 minute here?
Sure.
After the call. Okay.
Sure.
Cool.
Absolutely. That sounds good. Or should I just give you a shout on your cell phone?
Yeah, that's fine too. I want to look at this seller financing thing, and you guys I know you were covering all of what we're
Okay.
going through.
Let me
the
send you. I'll
accountability,
send
so.
you I'll send you an individual Zoom link, and we'll just jump on another one.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys next week. All right. Thanks.
Take care, everybody.